I'm Marty Kaplan. I'm the Associate Dean of the USC Annenberg School for Communication. I'm also the Director of the Norman Lear Center, and together the Lear Center and the Annenberg School are the sponsors of the Walter Cronkite Award, which we've been doing since 2000. So it's every 2 years, and this, we are thrilled to say, for the coverage that aired in 2006 is a terrific opportunity. So without any delay, the first thing I'd like you to do is please join me in congratulating the winners. There are going to be a lot of people later that I'd like to thank for all of this. And I'd also love to acknowledge all of the distinguished people in the audience. You know who you are. But I'm going to choose one person randomly to acknowledge and thank on behalf of everybody at this event. And so please join me in welcoming and thanking Mr. Norman Lear. The Norman Lear Center, the idea behind it is that entertainment has changed and affected every other domain in modern life. So if you think of entertainment as the need to capture and hold attention, the need to gain audiences, then you can think of entertainment not just as movies and pop music and television, but it's also a very important element of news, of politics, frankly, of education. You could look at blockbuster museums and talk about how high culture is a branch of the entertainment industry. You could look at Frank Gehry's Disney Hall and other Starkitects and how celebrity has affected urban planning, and on and on. And so one of the things that we look at is the way in which entertainment has affected news. News is obviously a business. And at the same time, news has a mission which is not only earning money. And so that tension, that exploration, is part of what we're up to. And when we give the Cronkite Award, and by the way, there are, and I'll introduce them later, judges and screeners for the Cronkite Award here, and we'll meet more of them later. When we give the Cronkite Award, the purpose is to honor the people who figure out how to walk that tightrope, how to deal with the tension between needing to hold audiences and also needing to inform the public. Not saying it's one or the other, but rather there is a way to reconcile those two things. So we're going to have a conversation about some of those issues. And I'd like generically to introduce the panel to you, just explain the layout here. There is a distinction in the industry between the talent and the suits. And what we have here on this side is the talent. The people, it's not an honorific term, not pejorative either. It's the people who go on the air and do the reporting and deliver the message. So this group here is talent. And then over here, these talented people who, like the talent, are wearing some suits, are and a dress, are management. And so in some cases, for example, Kevin and Amy work together, but we've made them have to wave just in order to help you get your bearings as to what their daily lives and jobs are about.
You can also see that's the pretty side of the room.
And just to give you a little more bearings, you have, I believe, the Cronkite Awards brochure, so you can always refer to that. But just so you know, so Amy is at News 8 in Austin, which is owned by Time Warner. Dan and Ben are a team at WGAL in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, which is an NBC affiliate owned by Hearst Argyle. Ben is the on-air reporter, and Dan is in a slightly different position in two ways. One is he is a photographer and editor, so this is a team here, and the other is his family is here. Where's his mom? So, and his aunt. So, got to be careful. And then Greg is at WESH in Winter Park, Florida, which is near Orlando.
It is. It's the Orlando market.
It's the Orlando market.
Yeah, we do this for tax purposes.
Yes, exactly. And a KNBC, an NBC Hearst Argyle station. Robert Mack is at KING in Seattle, which is an NBC affiliate owned by Belo. Brian is at ABC Network News, running the investigative unit there, and his two crack producers are here, Rhonda Schwartz and Maddie Sauer. Would you raise your hands? So there's Rhonda and Maddie right over there. And then Steve Schwade is the Senior Vice President for News and Programming at the NBC Television Stations Division, so all the O&Os. And so Steve's phone is ringing a lot today, and so we might get to talking about why that is and why he's happy to be here rather than near it. Hearst Argyle is a mid-sized group of stations which many times has won the Cronkite Award because of the commitment at the top of Hearst Argyle and therefore what the stations do, and the senior guy in news for all the Hearst Argyle stations is Fred Young. Michelle Butt, who is here from the NBC affiliate in Baltimore, is also a Hearst Argyle station. Charles Kravitz is at New England Cable News, which is NBC and Hearst Argyle. No? No, which is?
We're half owned by Comcast and half owned by the Hearst Corporation.
Got it. Sorry. So half owned by Hearst Corporation.
Yes.
Thank you.
And half owned by Comcast.
Half owned by Comcast. And it's a cable station. So we have some broadcast and some cable. Andy Moore is from a public television station, Wisconsin public television station, which from time to time does partnerships with non-public stations of various kinds. But he's in a different position because the financing and structure of public television.
State of Wisconsin owns us.
State of Wisconsin, exactly. And then Kevin is the news director side of Amy. And so that's the general background. What I'd like to do is to start by, this is the Walter Cronkite Award. And Walter Cronkite gave a speech a couple of months ago in New York at the Columbia School of Journalism. And I wanted to quote from, hey Ed, come on in. I wanted to, well, let me just say while Ed Guthman, a legend in journalism, is coming in. I wanted to say that a reason that we are videotaping this is because, as with previous Cronkite awards, we're going to take all of the packages you submitted for your awards, which are in many cases up to 40 minutes long, plus an edited version of this conversation, and make it available to every station in the country, so that as news directors and station managers and correspondents all discuss how do we, should we, can we cover politics, this material will be available to them. As such, this is on the record, but we also hope somehow you'll forget as professionals that you're being filmed and be far more candid than you would otherwise choose to be. So give yourself permission both to be on the record and on deep background, okay? Walter Cronkite, speaking at Columbia, and I'm quoting now from him, he said, he's talking about the issues of journalism today, media ownership in particular. He says, the major problem I see today has to do with unrealistic expectations that consolidated corporate ownership puts on working journalists. They are saddled with inflated profit expectations from Wall Street. They face round after round of job cuts and cost cuts that require them to do ever more with ever less. It's not just the journalists' jobs at risk here, it's American democracy, it's freedom's future. Of course, with the right resources, TV news could raise the floor of knowledge and the viewer's understanding of the world. But news of that sort is expensive to gather and report, and the news budgets we've got today just aren't up to the task. What we're left with is a soundbite culture that turns political campaigns into political theater, and the media business has been a willing accomplice in this deterioration. So I'm starting by saying you are the best, and you get a free pass for being an exception. But take Walter Cronkite's case seriously. Is the coverage, serious coverage of political news on television, is it an endangered species? Are these financial pressures as serious and dangerous as Walter Cronkite is saying? Steve?
I don't think it's much. I think the bigger challenge is the web, because we don't have the time to get to a lot of the depth that a user, as we now call them, would go to the web. So I think the challenge for us is how to take our resources that we have and try to serve multiple platforms. I think that's the bigger challenge we're all running into right now.
Fred?
I agree. I agree with Steve, but I would like to come at it from a little bit of a different direction. I don't think serious coverage is endangered if you're committed to doing serious coverage. And everybody at this table, because there are some repeat winners and repeat companies that keep coming back, there is a lot of commitment in our industry. I think the web and the new media are a threat, having just come from the NAB, RTNDA, same venue.
National, for those not in the business, the National Association of Broadcasters, Radio and Television News Directors Association just had a convention in Las Vegas, so the bags under the executive eyes are inexplicable.
Having sat through a panel at the RTNDA just a couple of days ago and heard a very limited representation of a broadcaster on that panel by a local broadcaster, which bothered me, and a network president, Steve Kappas from NBC, who did a terrific job defending us. I heard web, political, internet people who frightened me because they really believe in their own mind, and they may be right, by the way, that they really are controlling, manipulating, and road mapping the destiny of national elections. And to me, that's a bigger threat to political reporting than our commitment and our desire to maintain our legacy as local and/or cable and/or whatever kind of network broadcasters.
Anyone want to add? Michelle?
Well, I was going to say, I was at the same panel discussion that Fred was at, and what I realized afterwards is that political reporting on a local level is more important than ever because of the bloggers and the wonkettes and the people that fancy themselves, and as Fred says, maybe they are, and I just don't get it. But I don't think a man sitting at a computer in Missouri has the right, when he doesn't live in the state of Maryland, to tell Maryland viewers and readers how they should vote. I believe at the end of the day, I still have a better handle, and after listening to that discussion, believe I should have a better handle on what's happening in my community, and that's my responsibility. And if we are willing to not make the effort, then we're going to surrender our responsibility to people sitting in anonymity in a room. And while that is an important function of the Fourth Estate, it cannot diminish what has to be our role.
Kevin?
You know, I take one I don't like disagreeing with Walter Cronkite at all, but but I take a little bit of issue in the way that he framed the discussion. I'm not sure that money guides the decisions on whether or not to cover politics. I think what we're lacking is good creative thinking in covering politics. The people, if you look at the work that the people sitting at these tables have done, it is very much groundbreaking entertainment that uses politics as that discusses how to present politics to an audience better. You were just talking about political theater, and I think it was mentioned in almost a negative tone. Politics has always been great theater and great drama in politics. The key, I think, to good journalism is to make it really, really interesting and entertaining to the viewer. And I think the people around this table have found really unique ways to do that. And when you hear about stations deciding not to cover politics because it's boring, I think what they're missing is just quality, creative thinking is what's missing in that mix.
You who cover politics, do you think you are on the fast track in a growth sector, or are you scrambling against the forces of cuts and the suspicion that the audience is not interested?
Well, it's kind of tough. Fred, first of all, is our boss, so he's doing a great job. I want to say that first of all.
But
Is it a
go
growth
ahead,
industry?
Say but. Go ahead.
Is it a growth industry? I think more of what Cronkite is pointing out, if I read what he's saying, is that people are too easily, and people meaning news directors and corporations, are too easily passing off political journalism as boring journalism. And maybe I have a different perspective because I also teach college at Rollins College, and I talk to my students, and one of the first things I ask them every semester is, how many of you watch local news? And I get virtually no hands. And I said, well, where do you get information when you get it? He said, well, we go to the web. So I think fundamentally one of the things that Hearst has done that's done a really good job, and I'm glad for it, is that while we're all doing creative TV at King in Seattle and News 8 in Austin and our Hearst stations, we are trying to funnel the bulk of that into our website, which we control, and giving people that longer format information that they can use. Now, as Kevin was pointing out, we have to get them hooked in our local news. And if we can't get them hooked, if we're not doing a good job, then they have every right to tune us out. And so I think if corporations can at least give us the amount of room that we need to develop creative television to get people hooked, that will drive them to our websites, and that will keep them happily connected to our brands, which is our stations.
So a theme here is that politics can, by its very nature, be interesting, be as audience riveting as any other kind of content that news covers, but you have to know how to do it. You have to be committed to doing it. So, Ben.
I was going to say, you also talked about, are we a dying breed? Is politics and television news a dying breed? I don't think so. In 2006, we had a rather extraordinary year in Pennsylvania politics. We had, and it was kind of sparked in 2005, actually. Our state lawmakers decided at 2 a.m. in July, the last day before they went home for the summer, to give themselves a 16% pay raise. And that didn't go over so well with most voters. So that allowed us to, there was this groundswell of folks that were tuning back in to politics and to government in general. And I think that carried into 2006, certainly with the elections that we have. And we saw every story that we ran, we would get emails on. We got emails about asking us, why don't we push further, or why don't we ask this, or what did the candidate mean by that? And folks really seemed to show an interest. And I don't know if that was, I think that may have transcended across parts of the nation, because I think other stations in the chain may have seen the same thing. I don't know. But I think there was a long period of increasing apathy that maybe in 2006 turned the corner a little bit and receded. And so I can only hope that in the work that we were able to do as far as being creative, pushing the candidates, there were so many good stories out there that just we felt were not being told until you push the envelope a little bit. And our viewers reacted very positively. They found it interesting. And you were talking about the web. One thing that we tried to do with the web on our website, and that Hearst has also pushed us to do, is to also generate web exclusive content, not necessarily a different story, but put information on the web you can't put on the air necessarily because you don't have the time or the space. We would put a lot of raw documents on our website. When we were doing ad watches, for instance, we put both candidates' ads, the raw ad by itself on the website, and then we put a lot of our documentation. There was one ad in particular that involved campaign contributions. We would put the links to, this is the contribution they're talking about, here it is, from the Department of State's website. So we were able to do kind of different content like that on the web, and viewers responded. I really think they did.
Greg asked that question, who watches local news, and got a small response. The Pew Center did a survey that was released just this week, and they asked Americans, where do you get your news? What's your number one source? And the number one source at 71% was local television news. So for most Americans, 71%, and the next one after that was local newspapers, not national papers. So local television news, local newspapers. So we also at the Lear Center, we study the content of local news around the country. And what we find is that your stations are at one end of the curve, and most stations are very much elsewhere. It's not that they don't, for example, do enough issue stories and focus too much on the horse race. They just don't cover politics. So if it's such good theater, if it's such audience-pleasing stuff, if the viewers respond to it, why is not the whole industry like you? Andy.
I'd like to make a kind of a global answer to that. And as journalists, we're supposed to be objective. But I'm here to say that it's important to care about what's going on with your state government. It's important to care about your congressional delegation's votes. And with that in mind, I see an industry disconnect to local politics that the industry itself actually drives. I work with and teach students at the University of Wisconsin as part of our mission in public TV. Our charter is owned by University of Wisconsin at Madison. And I keep track, and I'm happy to keep track of the students that graduate and who email me and keep in touch. And what do they say when they're in South Bend, Indiana? I like it here, but I can't wait to leave. I'm out of here another 6 months. I'm going to get a bigger market job. And whenever that happens, I can't help but think, and watching some of the good younger reporters that are even in our market, and knowing that they live on the outskirts of town, they can't name the Speaker of the State Assembly because they're not invested. And so it's an interesting outcome, I think, to how it works to get better jobs in our business and divorce yourself of caring about where you are until you get to where you want to go.
Steve, you want to take?
How did we get to a stage of some stations doing very poor coverage? I think it's kind of a cause and effect. And I don't know if anybody's gone back. I think it was like in the 80s, there was the Charlotte-Mecklenburg project with the Charlotte Observer. And what they found was TV stations have a tendency, we all want numbers. We're all going for those numbers. Well, if we see less people voting, we think they care less about politics. So we're going to do less political coverage. Then you see less people voting. And it becomes this chicken and the egg. And what they started there was this process saying, we are going to create on-air content, we're going to create, and they worked with a TV station, we're going to create newspaper content and get the users, get the newspaper readers involved. Put the viewer questions out there and force the candidates responding. And that's part of the process. Is, as managers, and I think you have to empower your reporters, and the managers also have to say to the young producers especially, well, nobody really cares about politics, we're not going to do politics. Well, I think we kind of saw in the last election that there is an interest. Look at everybody in politics right now. Who would think here we are, 18 months or so, and you have millions of dollars, you have umpteen candidates. There is this interest, and you can work that to your advantage. People will come to you, and you can make money off of it as a business.
Fred?
The good news about sitting here with several of my colleagues is that I may be defending the other side, but only because I was trained to defend all sides. But I'm here representing our side, which in your mind we appreciate is the right side. But the other side of this is that going back to the 70s when I was a relatively young news director, and it was Frank Maggot at the time, and whether you like him or not, and he continues to be one of the brightest sets of brains in the industry, albeit we might disagree with him, some of us, over the years. Yeah, I think they kind of told some stations that politics were poison.
He's a consultant who, he and his company go from station to station around the country, giving advice on who they should hire, what the set should look like, what the content of the shows.
Right. So he said politics are boring and they're just talking heads and you shouldn't do it. So that became one of these generic things that kept getting written about in our industry. Broadcasters don't cover politics because they're talking heads and they're boring. Well, talking heads are boring. If you have any kind of a class here on news production, you all know that talking heads at their limit are boring. But there is a way to do good TV, and in every market or every network environment, some people have different positions and different points of view. I live in a market, I won't tell you where it is, where the leading station sort of blows away politics. And their idea of politics is a 30-second voiceover sometimes. And leading up to an election, you might see a couple of quick sound bites of two candidates butted together. You know what? They're the leading station in the market. And oh, by the way, I won't tell you what market or what station, but it is the same company that supports Brian and his work. So, and it's not New York, by the way. It's not WABC. It could be.
It's Maggot Station, by the way.
It doesn't matter. The point is that Steve's company has a station in this market, not New York, that does a better job of it, which I'm sure why he's sitting here today. So there are different perspectives, and as you study this and analyze it, remember the good guys. But there are other points of view, and you should just never dismiss them out of hand without trying to find out what led them to that point, I guess.
I want to come back quite a bit to the internet question, because everyone's raised it. But before we do, I just want to keep rolling a few threads out for the conversation. Brian, and we'll talk in a bit about the internet side. If talking heads are boring,
I don't accept that. But
okay.
It depends who's talking and what they're saying.
Well, then let me ask you about that, because the typical scenario for a candidate with a camera in front of him or her is to stay on message. Their job is to make no mistakes and do nothing that they did not intend to do. For the correspondent, you're trying, I assume, to get them to make news, to go off message, to be candid, or is that not right?
I think on one hand you're trying to cover what they're trying to say, but what they're really saying, you're trying to pierce pomposity and trying to be all things to all people and try to figure out what the person's real voting record is. That takes some work to figure it out, what their real stance are, and that's what I think is interesting. Then you're doing a service for your viewers, and beyond that, it's of interest. I mean, it's interesting to watch, and I think what you were saying earlier is very important. It's the mastery of the craft that is really important. If you know how to tell a good story, you can tell really any story and tell it well. And talking heads depends, as I said, who's doing the talking, what they're talking about, and who's asking the questions. Are they smart questions or stupid questions? And all of those are factors. And I don't think it's not automatic. And I guess I would also say I don't think we all have to be the same. I mean, if one station chooses to do fires and another chooses politics, then sort of let the viewers decide. And I think we know from the internet that the American public is interested in what's going on in the government. We know that. Now, they may not be able to watch the news at 5:30 or 11, but there are people who are interested. And there's no doubt about that. And it's our job to, I think, to make it interesting, to construct stories that are relevant and well done.
So among the ways in which, I'm sorry, Charles, did you want to?
Yeah, I just wanted to add that we shouldn't talk about news or local news as a kind of monolithic thing.
No, there's the good and the bad.
Well, no, not necessarily. I wasn't, not from the perspective of good or bad, but what it is and how, I mean, we're all going to talk about it. We're all quite obsessed with the web and what it means for our business. But I made a transition, a few others have in this business, from working in the local broadcast model to local cable news model. And I discovered some really kind of profound differences in what we can do, levels of freedom. I mean, I run a 24-hour news channel in New England, and we can approach politics differently than broadcast stations. We have endless amounts of time. We have a kind of a freedom that I completely sympathize with the other pressures on local broadcast stations. When you started this award in 2000, there was no award for local cable news. And I think that's an interesting observation. As if, and
as
we,
a category. There were,
as a
it didn't
category.
exist as a category among the awards.
You know, we were at that time in 2000, we were 8 years old, and yet we hadn't kind of, I think, risen to a level of awareness, as was the case with Kevin and News 8 Austin, another cable news channel. So, you know, you can look at this model kind of traditionally, because there are thousands of local television broadcast stations, and say, well, maybe there isn't enough politics going on. There's a lot of political coverage going on in our market, both with, you know, stations, broadcast stations, but also NECN, which I think has changed the nature of political coverage. And so, and I think that's about to change also, for better or for worse, perhaps, in the web. So this is an evolving business, and there are evolving models, and they allow us to approach the same sort of job, which is to cover the news, in different ways. And I would just kind of suggest that we recognize that from the network level down to broadcast to all news channels, and interestingly, there are no all news cable national channels here represented. I don't know whether they're competing in this award or not, but they're doing a lot of politics too. So you could argue, at least when I got into the business, there's a lot more political coverage going on in television than there used to be.
Let me ask, we've been talking about the craft, let me ask the people who ply the craft, how is it that you make politics something that holds audiences? Yes?
We had a really interesting series that we did.
Could you push the mic? Thank you.
Called Voters' Voices. And looking back, it's interesting because what we did is we found 4 families that had completely different backgrounds, diversities, family situations, and we just profiled them. What's important to you? And looking back, it's interesting because I don't know how much value that has in terms of, you know, helping people decide how to vote, but it was showing politics matter even to this single dad who really is not that politically aware, but he knows that politics matter in the future of his children, and for that reason he cares enough to vote and to teach them it's important to vote, to instill that in them. So I think that was a neat way for us to put politics back into the hands of the people, and for politicians to have a chance to hear from real people, from diverse backgrounds, what matters to you. And there were some repeating themes that, you know, you're going to have to address that because the people clearly care.
So putting the audience on the screen and seeing it from their perspective rather than a kind of official top-down. Dan and Ben, yeah.
Yeah, I would just say that it isn't always talking heads what we did, and I'd say at least probably 3, if not 4, of the stories that were on our compilation tape were 3-camera shoots, where either we had 2 cameras locked down and I was doing one and moving about, or I had an extra shooter that day or something. But you know, and so it's a 3-camera shoot. You have a lot of different angles. You can move the piece along very quickly, so it's not boring. It's not you're not sitting there watching this guy talk for 15 minutes, and you can really sort of edit your way out of boring TV.
Like us now.
Exactly. And Fred Young is great. I just want to throw that in there.
But Dan, let me follow this up though. So
yeah, I like it.
So when
Better jump in there,
when
Michelle.
Dan and Ben, you say, okay, we're going out and doing this political story, and we need to do a 3-camera shoot. How come someone doesn't say, what planet are you living on?
That comes from the top, and not again.
It does. It does.
It really does, because Charles talked about endless time. We, as a local news station, still do 5.5 hours of news a day. That's an awful lot of time. And we happen to be in a position where our corporation has said, we think this is important. We exist to serve the public. And so I mean, Dan and I would turn a 3.5-minute piece on politics that would air during News 8 at 6. And they have 22 minutes, but they would give us 3.5 minutes to do a candidate or a profile of Bob Casey, who was the Democrat running for Senate in Pennsylvania.
And for those of you who don't watch local television, that's a lifetime.
Yeah, that is a long time. And I think that direction can come because I think people are interested, because you also have to get back to what is politics about. As we talked about, it's about drama, it's about money and power. And what is more sexy or interesting than money and power? I think that.
Sex.
Well, okay, maybe sex, yes. But sometimes
And that's
politics can be
politics,
about that
exactly.
too. But
And power.
yeah. But I think that if you can, we did a story last June, and I know Michelle's station did a lot on campaign financing. We did a story last June. Our state Speaker of the House, we did an investigation of his campaign finances. He was running for re-election last year. He had an independent candidate challenge, and it wasn't really a big threat, did not appear to be a big threat, was raising huge amounts of money that he did pass on to the party to pass on to other candidates so he could keep his leadership post. But he was also spending a lot of that money on trips. He went to Las Vegas 3 times. He went to see the Eagles play in the Super Bowl. He went to see the Steelers play in the Super Bowl using his campaign funds. So there were, and viewers really reacted to that. I think there are interesting stories out there to tell without it just, I like Dan, don't buy that it's just talking heads. I mean, look at, even just look at people are getting squeezed by gas prices, their taxes are going up, and these are fundamental issues that are related to everything from the Iraq War to drilling off the coast of Florida. So, or in Alaska. So I think that it's about money and power. And if you can relate that, if you can relate it to what your viewers are feeling, much as News 8 Austin did, I think you can. It's an easy sell.
Marty, can I interject real quickly?
Sure.
Because I wanted something Ben said that I think is really, really important there that I don't want to get lost. Because I still want to talk about this crisis of creativity that I think we find ourselves in. WGAL will not put 3.5 minutes of television on the air if it's not compelling, informative, and entertaining. Mm-hmm. And they have found a way. I don't care what the subject is. It doesn't matter. You don't get 3.5 minutes just to flesh something out. It's got to be great television. And you can do, as Ben said, you can do great television about anything. It's just about how well you put those stories together and how interesting you make them. Now, yes, it takes a huge commitment from the top because it takes a little longer to do these stories sometimes. You have to be able to apply your resources and say, we're going to give you the time to do the story well. Yes, but you also need talented individuals like are sitting over there who can put a story together in a really compelling and interesting way, and that is the crisis I think we face.
Robert?
But Kevin, I'll go back to the how we started this and the premise that you used, and I think we need to acknowledge that covering politics is more expensive.
Absolutely.
I think the quote that you used at the beginning is very true. I don't think there's any denying that. Yes, you can put on 3.5 minutes. You can put on 1 minute, but it is still in the aggregate. It is still more expensive to do politics because it takes a more experienced reporter. It takes more resources in terms of time and resources. I don't care how many years you've done it. An ad watch takes you a set amount of time, and it's going to take research, and it's going to take extra production value. It's going to take producers. These things are more expensive, and when you weigh them and you look at the amount of time that you spend and the amount of resources that you spend for the number of seconds on television, it is more expensive. You can take, as Andy mentioned, you can take a reporter from any market in the country, plonk him in a city, and ask them to cover an apartment fire and wrap it with a live shot, and you probably will come out with something that looks acceptable on television.
And will lead the half hour.
Right, but you can't take a reporter from another city, bring them in to any market and then suddenly expect them to cover politics. It takes a long time to become grounded in the community, to find out what's going on. And I think that's, Brian says that, talking heads don't have to be boring, but they can be. and if you have a veteran who can make talking heads compelling, that it's not a cheap reporter, and it's not someone without any experience. It's someone who has spent the time to figure out how to do it creatively. And so I think that's the problem. Now, having said that, I think we're right. Charles, you mentioned that with the opportunities with cable and the internet, I think there are a lot of niche markets that we're seeing develop, and there are certainly business opportunities that can make politics and covering what we do profitable and intriguing to businesses. I think some of us have found ways to do that, and that's the hope for the future. But I still think we have to admit that it is a more expensive proposition than covering a fire.
Greg, you were reaching for the mic?
Do you want me to defer my time to you so you can talk more about power and sex?
I'm going to get it through you.
Oh, okay. Well, first of all, I'm going to commend all of you on something that I learned here 2 years ago at a seminar.
Greg was a participant in a seminar that the Knight Center, which is a continuing education program at the Annenberg School, did on the topic of covering politics, and you were here with a bunch of colleagues.
And it worked out great. We actually borrowed 2 ideas that we learned from that seminar, and we put them to work in last year's election cycle. And 2 of those things that I think will also be appealing to news directors. It's also true that when we do things like truth tests, we typically get about 3 minutes. But a lot of times we don't want to spend that kind of time on a story. And so to try to appeal to the time constrictions in a newscast and to try to deliver to people information in shorter fashion but still effective, what we did was to do stories in a problem-solution analysis setup. We would take any number of 15 to 18 in both the governor's and Senate race problems that are going on in our state. We would commit ourselves to do 1 minute or less as a package to explain it. That package did not include any sound bites from candidates. We're constantly trying to weave these opus-type stories where we have lots of sound bites from candidates going in and out, and at the end of it, you say to yourself, well, that sounds like a problem, but I don't think I understood what the candidates had to say about it. So we decided to remove them from the process of telling the story of the problem. We told the problem in a minute. We came back on camera. We then posed these questions on these issues to each of the candidates. We gave them a full 30 seconds each to respond, but we told them, if you take longer than 30, I'm cutting you off. So we would then come back, listen to what they plan to do to fix the problem, and then we would do an analysis of it, talking to people who are in the know in areas of education and taxes and so forth. And then, which one of these plans can work? And we would say at the end, it appears that, Jim Davis's plan could work and Charlie Crist's plan might not. That was one idea we got from here. The other one was, and this kind of worked out well for that young audience that I mentioned a moment ago that doesn't seem to watch local news, but they do want to vote. We would go out and recruit people on the campus of the University of Central Florida and the University of Florida, broadcast students, to go out and do a handful of stories. We then brought them onto our show with their packages, talking to students about what they want to see done by the next governor or the next senator. Then we went out and did that same, what are you going to do about it, soundbite from each of the governor candidates and Senate candidates, and then did an analysis of that. Can you lower tuition? Can you reduce student fees? Is there a reason why people are paying for services on campus that they don't participate in, and why are they paying it? All those kinds of things. Campus safety, which now turns out to be very important. So those 2 things enabled us to do stories that were punchy, that removed a lot of the talking heads from the guts of the explanation of the problem, but then allowed us to sit back and really soak in what they say they are going to do about it. And it put the candidates in a position of being clear and concise right now.
I'm going to turn in a moment to ask Brian to tell a story, but before I do, I know, Michelle, you wanted to get in on this.
Yeah, and mine goes back to something that Robert, is that right? I'm sorry, I'm not always good with names, which is not a great admission when you're a journalist, said that politics is hard, or that people don't necessarily do politics because it's more expensive. As the person responsible for the expenses of the newsroom, my station, that's not true. And I think people that ingest money into this argument are sometimes, and this is not directed at you, but on a larger picture are looking for an easy excuse. Look, politics doesn't break out. I know when the General Assembly is meeting a year in advance, so I plan for it. I know when election nights are, so I plan for it. I budget for it. I can't plan for a tragically unstable man to go shoot 32 kids at Virginia Tech, and suddenly I have to send 2 satellite truck operators, 3 photographers, 2 reporters. That's what's expensive. So in actuality, the stuff that people are doing that's not politics that they think is sexy and is driving the numbers is more expensive at the end of the day, magnitude by 1,000, than me planning for the political process and covering it. There is a great line in A League of Their Own where Tom Hanks says to Gina Davis, "It's the hard that makes it great." I would tell you politics is assumed to be hard, and it can be, but it will make great television. You just have to work at it. You have to plan for it. You have to invest in it. And you can control it and manage it, actually, a lot better when you do those things.
I was going to add, too, just to just peel off on what you said about sending trucks and going down to Virginia Tech, absolutely. How much money do we think was spent on the Anna Nicole Smith coverage? How much money do you think that was? And that
Worth
was
every penny.
dramatically more expensive, but it sure was sexy. So, I agree with Michelle in saying that I think the revenue side and the money side is little more than an excuse for us quite often. But you know what? That kind of coverage is easier. That's for sure,
Yeah.
and you're absolutely
It is
right.
easy, and easy doesn't
it's
necessarily.
the hard in it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that's okay.
Steve?
I can't even think of a time where we've had a budget meeting or a budget conversation and said, we're not going to cover politics, save money. It just.
But
you know,
how about, do we have a beat reporter covering politics?
in some of our markets we do. We also believe that a lot of our senior reporters should be able to interchangeable. If they're living in the market, they know the market. But the other part of it is, and everybody's talking about, you have to think, I think, even more outside the box. That the Annenberg School at the University of Pennsylvania approached us a couple of years ago with some high school students. They had a high school class, and they said, how would you get us involved? We would like to get involved in political coverage. And we said, we're going to turn over 10 minutes more. Every Saturday morning, we're turning 10 minutes over to you. We will give you a crew. You take your person, your high school reporter. We will supervise it when it comes back in to make sure the content is suitable for air. But we put them on the air, and we let them ask the questions they thought that were relevant, like the college students, but they're the ones who are going to think. We kind of live in a box, and we're kind of colored by what happens in the newsroom a lot of times and what we think is important among a certain class of citizens, and we're not always in touch. And part of it is, that's the scary part of the web, is you're hearing from all the people who think they're in touch, and they have their point of view, but if you get people who are citizens in the community, you get 17-year-old kids, 18-year-old kids who are going to vote. They got a whole different set of questions than we have.
God, from your mouth to God's ears. And
I want to return to the question of this great debate over whether Talking Heads is boring or whether it's exciting. But first, I promised myself I would make this announcement out here when I drew the long straw to be able to come for our station. A Green Party candidate lied to me this year. And I just want to say that out loud because, a lot of people that cover politics and that work in politics say that the end of the electoral process in our country is going to be related to how much it costs to run for office. And I generally agree with that. And until last fall when a Green Party candidate to my face lied to me about a certain commitment, and I thought to myself, well, that's the end of the electoral process as we know it. One of the ways that we've had fun, and I don't think I've heard that word yet, and it's got to be fun. If
comes
it ain't
with
fun,
entertainment, comes with audience attention.
if it's not fun to make it, it's not fun to watch it. And so one of the liberties we've taken, and we have time, as cable does too on public television, and we can commit hours in prime time to politics, and we never take that for granted. But one of the ways that we've helped make our viewers smarter is with various approaches to debates, and there could be no bigger example of talking heads than debates. So how do you make that more attractive? We've taken talking heads out of it. And over the last 3 election cycles, we've had what we call moderatorless debates. And we've assigned gubernatorial candidates topics. We've made them sit at a very small table together, and we've given them, okay, 20 minutes on the state budget deficit. See you in 20 minutes. It becomes very real, right down to who starts speaking first. And they're all like, well, how do we get started? And then they get human, and they start pulling things from one another. And it's great fun to watch. And it makes the viewers pretty involved in an hour's worth of political discussion. The one other example that I wanted to give was that unlike in some of the western states, like Roberts, Wisconsin voters aren't very practiced at voting for referendums. We don't do that very much. Out here, you vote for as many ballots as you do people. But we had, as a handful of other states had last fall, a same-sex constitutional referendum on the ballot, and we thought, oh my goodness, this is really important. It's a fiery debate, but it's going to be overshadowed by a very hot and contentious governor's race and attorney general's race. What do we do? What we did was we created a trial, and we put the constitutional amendment on trial and be it resolved, just as it was on the ballot. We hired 2 attorneys who brought real people as their witnesses, taped the trial for an hour and 15 minutes, and then edited it to an hour. And it got some real issues out there. And just like any courtroom drama, there were funny moments, there were candid moments, there were extremely emotional moments. It was good talking heads.
Robert Mack, you and your producer, Michael Cate, trick of the trade?
I don't think there's any one trick of the trade. I think the thing that I've looked at over the years is to have a very deep toolbox, because politics, like anything else, it requires different skills for different stories. So, you know, we do the debates. We've tried the debate without the moderator. We've done the ad watches. You have your candidate profiles. You have your campaign finance stories. You have all the different formats of what you can do. And at the beginning of the year, as you head into an election cycle, you sit there and you have a very long meeting, and you look at how you're going to approach different races, different candidates, different initiatives in our case. And it's different every time. The question is, we get together, and Greg, this is what we've been doing, is it's great to have this opportunity to come together and get new ideas so that your toolbox gets deeper every time. Some ideas work, some ideas don't. Some ideas take you 2, 3, 4 attempts. You know, maybe by the 5th year you try it, you get the bugs out. And that's why I say, you know, ultimately it's maybe, Michelle, you don't budget and find that politics is more expensive because you're not actually writing a dollar figure for it. But it is harder. It is harder to do because it takes us longer to make it interesting and compelling television. It's an extra hurdle, and I think that's what I think Mr. Cronkite is alluding to. That stations have that extra hurdle. If you go to Middle America and you pick a station and you try and prove political coverage in that station, it's a difficult task. It's not something that just happens overnight.
Fred, and then I'm going to ask Brian.
Yeah, one of the reasons why, excuse me, we suits are glad to be invited to these meetings once in a while is because it allows us to add a perspective that I think Michelle laid out eloquently before, but a message that, just assuming this would be a class rather than an award presentation, and I like to leave with young people when I get a chance, get invited to speak to them, is everything Robert said is true, but I suspect along the way there are dozens, if not hundreds, of news directors that Steve and I have met, having met most of them, who would look at somebody in the eye who wants to do something really special and say, I wish I had the money, but I need you out on the street. And that's where that money mindset comes from. But we have a commitment in our company, and which is why we're here, and it comes from the CEO, by the way, and that is to do this. But this is all about allocation of resources. You have a budget. If you're going to do it, you assign the best person, you give him or her the time, they understand what the ground rules and the parameters are, you give them some help, producers if they're available, et cetera, but you get it done. This is not about money. This is about what your station wants to do. and we thrive on it. And I would point out, we own WMUR in Manchester, and since you're all political junkies, you all know what WMUR in Manchester is. It's always the very first television station in the country that gets to do the best political reporting when the horse race is just beginning. So, and this is our second presidential election with them, and we love having them. But this goes not only from Baltimore to Orlando, two of our biggest markets. This goes to Lancaster. And you know what? They don't have the budget that they do in Orlando. And it goes to Plattsburgh, and it goes to Jackson, Mississippi. It's about commitment and resources. And if you want to get something done, you get it done.
So the internet has been a topic. Many ways to explore it, many ways to look at its impact. But one is as an opportunity, not as a dark force, but as an opportunity both to put news out and to even be a tool for news gathering. So the ABC News Investigative Unit has a website, and the URL is abcblotter.com. Brian, would you tell about how your reporting on the Mark Foley scandal played out, especially in terms of new media?
And we call it a blotter, not a blogger, so we want to make sure that we're not giving out personal opinions, we're reporting facts. But some of the stories that go on our website are stories that wouldn't necessarily make it onto the World News with Charles Gibson. Rhonda and Maddie had worked on a story. We had a tip that a congressman from Florida was writing inappropriate emails to a page, a 17-year-old boy from Louisiana. And we obtained the emails. And it was the congressman saying, what do you want for your birthday? Can you send me a picture? Do you work out in the gym? Very suggestive, probably not right, but nothing very explicit. But having done the first go-around with congressional pages as a reporter at NBC in the 80s, it struck me as wrong. It wasn't a story that Gibson or Banner would put on the World News, but it was a story that we could put on our blotter. So we ran an item on a Thursday after contacting the congressman, and the press secretary of the congressman said, Brian should come and meet Mark. He's just a very overly friendly guy, you have to understand that. But we heard from congressional aides, they were very disturbed about this, and that was one of the ways we got to the information. We posted that on a Thursday afternoon, and we know now later that Foley was thinking about suing us for it. People in our Washington bureau were very upset, and they said, what business is that of us? We generally are at war with our Washington bureau because we're not really part of that in crowd. And about 2 or 3 hours after we posted the item, in the viewer comments were comments from other former pages who said, that's nothing. Would you like to see what he also says? Wow. Sure. And so, and then we began to get in contact. Maddie Sauer got in contact with 2 of these young men who sent the material to us. And so Friday morning, we actually had it, and we talked to people. They weren't just messages online. And they were incredibly outrageous, very, very explicit, describing sex acts, what we could do. Foley was very, very careful to say, because he wrote the federal law, he knew he had to wait till the boys were 18 to have actual physical contact. So there was a lot of sort of fantasy back and forth. And when are you 18? February 23rd. All right, I'll see you on February 24th. And a lot of back and forth. And we had this sort of bombshell material. But it was sort of, one, how do you authenticate it? Instant messages, we've seen what happened to Mary Mapes and Dan Rather. We can imagine somebody had sat down and spent a lot of time to take us in. And so armed with this information we had in our kind of viewer response, Maddie Sauer called the press secretary, who we'd been dealing with, and read a couple of little excerpts and said, we've got this online, want to get some kind of reaction. And I had gone over to talk to the people at World News that maybe next week we'll have a story. We're trying to figure out how to authenticate this. And we had his login, which is sort of, very specific. It seemed right. And then Maddie called and said, he's going to resign. About an hour and a half later, the press secretary called back and said, yes, he's going to resign, and we want to make a deal with you. If you won't use the emails, you can have the exclusive on the resignation. We don't make those kind of deals. So the story broke on the AP at about 2:40 that day that Congressman Mark Foley of Florida will not be running for re-election. And that was all. So by 3 o'clock, we were able to write the story, hours after being questioned about sexually explicit emails to a former congressional page. Congressman Mark Foley resigned. And that was how it happened. And I am certain that without our blotter, our internet website presence, that story would have never happened. That story, one, probably didn't meet the criteria for a world news piece. Newspapers in Florida had the information for months, and they never ran it. They debated whether they should have or not, but they never ran it. And even if we had somehow gotten it out, I don't think that those that were now college students would have figured out or wanted to figure out how to call the ABC switchboard and get transferred or get lost or viewer response, But this very direct connection with our readers, viewers, what do you call them? Viewsers. Those gave us an important investigative lead. Now, it wasn't enough just to put it on the air immediately. We had to do all the necessary steps. It was a kind of thing that I think will change journalism and gives us a rare insight, a way to really be back and forth, with the people who are out there who know a lot more than we do. And that's how that story came about.
So that's the bright side, a bright side of new media, both as a tool for putting stuff out and collecting information. Until recently, political director of ABC, Mark Halperin, who founded a kind of must-read inside political blog called The Note, which is about what he calls the Gang of 500, the Washington insiders, what they're thinking. He recently wrote a book with a collaborator, and in that book, he said that the news agenda in this country is set by Matt Drudge. And he did not say it regretfully or outraged. It was matter of fact and almost kind of cool. That, wow, look at how this works. Someone gives Drudge a tip, it goes up, and then every news director and editor and producer drudges their home page, they all read it, and it all sets their agenda.
Drudge is very, very powerful in that world, since he's one of the founding fathers of it. He started with material that was wildly inaccurate, but now that he's made a lot of millions of dollars, he no longer is so reckless because he knows if he's sued, he has something to lose. Before he had nothing. Go ahead and go ahead and sue me. I have nothing. You can take anything I want. You've got, you can have my beat-up old car. Now he's a multimillionaire because of this website. And we know, as a commercial aspect, if one of our stories on our blotter is linked to the Drudge site, that can be an extra 500,000 viewers or hits. And I think that what Mark was alluding to is that to the extent that people fashion their stories so that it hits Drudge, it's commercially successful, but you are appealing to somebody who has, I think, proven over the years to have a very sort of conservative bent. He hated the story about Foley. It was against, in many ways, half of him hated it, half of him loved it, for a variety of reasons. But it became very big on Drudge, and from there it just took off. But he is very powerful in that way, because he's one of the few who sort of is, he's kind of like the Reader's Digest, I guess. He kind of pulls together, and I think he's a very good editor, frankly. I think he has kind of an eye for the interesting stories, the full range. I mean, he's very much into politics.
Is anyone concerned about the influence on what gets covered and how it gets framed?
I just wanted to throw in that with what Brian was saying, I think that is the beauty of what we do. We're better writers. We're better shooters. We're better producers. We're better. So the bloggers shouldn't really scare us. The new media doesn't scare us because we're better at it. So we can do that too. We can do it. We can do both. We can do everything, and we can do it better. So I don't know that scares me. I'm on this side of the table. I'm not in the suit. So It scares them more than it would me.
If we're afraid of it, we're really being foolish, because that is our future, and to deny that is to sort of say we're sticking with horseshoes. I mean, it's
right.
That's what's going to happen. You know, I think everybody here, talking before we started, that is the big shift, is to put our material there. And I think for journalism students, I think the message is clear that to be in television news is no longer just good enough to how to shoot a picture.
Yeah.
You have to be able to write, think through a story. I mean, there are a wider variety of training you're going to need, and particularly with writing.
But you also alluded to the fact that it's not just the bloggers, but what you are fighting is perception from talk radio and from other, we're liberal, biased media, blah, blah, blah. And so you're fighting that perception all the time, too, as a news organization, traditional news organization. So, but again, I don't think it matters, because, again, you're doing it. You're doing it better.
I have a strong view that I think that we do best, ABC, major organizations, by still, in a way, kind of sticking to our knitting, not trying to be right-wing, left-wing, try to do that, but because there are so many voices out there, which is all good, I think. But at some point, people say, I have to really sort of figure out what is the baseline. Who is this going to show up in ABC? Then I know it's for real.
Well, that's really the challenge I think all of us have already grappled with at some point along the way, is that we have different standards in broadcast. I think we all have separate standards as television stations, but we are challenged in reevaluating our standards when something gets onto the blog and it becomes common knowledge. Everyone's talking about it, and we have to decide, at what point does that become part of our broadcast, and it challenges all the standards that we've had in the past, and I think we've all dealt with that, and I think that's something we have to grapple with.
And do you see it having an impact, or is it more likely now that something will make it onto the air because of the pressure of it already being online somewhere?
That's what my question is, and I think we've all dealt with that already at some
point.
Your
answer is no.
I mean, at some point when it becomes common knowledge, and then then another newspaper is more likely to print it, or another broadcaster is more likely to pick it up. It's not that we're all a monolithic group just setting standards, and at some point I think that, well, like it or not, that does challenge us.
I mean, what worries me more about the web is not as much the standards, it's the fact that how do you know what you're reading is real? And that's the scariest part of it. So you will have reporters say, I saw this on a website. Well, how do you know it's real? So we've actually taught our reporters how to figure out who owns a website. Because if you don't know who owns the website, there are certain signals. Oh, now I can call that individual, I can try to track it down. I own a couple of quote-unquote ethical websites we use for classes for $9.99 a year. I can post anything on it. That's what scares me the most of all, is you have reporters who are desperately looking for stories, especially the younger reporters. They see it on the web. I teach a class also at Temple University, and I make it part of the class when you do a project, you cannot do your research on the web. You can't use it, because you'll get reports where they quote Wikipedia. We were talking about this the other day. Al Primo, who's well known in this industry, Wikipedia had a segment the other day that he died from a stroke. It was a surprise to Al, who was walking around at NAB. But the problem is this self-regulating internet, well, who's regulating it? And that's what kind of scares me more about the web. It's not even the quality. If I go to the ABC site and there's Brian Ross's report, I say, I'm not quite sure I'm comfortable with it, but it has the ABC seal of approval. And I think that's where all of our stations come in. When we start this and we pick stories up, Drudge is great for what he is. He's an aggregator. You're going to see more and more of those on our own sites. We're all going to do more and more aggregation of content on our sites. But how do we on our site say, hey, this is aggregated. I can't vouch for this. This out there. I'm just warning you, it's out there. But here on this side of the page, we're putting the NBC, the Hearst, the ABC seal of approval. We feel good about those stories. That's kind of our role, I think, the next role we have on the web.
Charles, a quick one. I just wanted to.
Well, I just want to ask Brian a question, because I didn't know how the Foley story had played out, and I'm kind of a little surprised by it. It sounds like what you're saying is that you have an entirely different set of standards. No. Well, let me just finish the question, okay? Because this is just the way it appeared to me, so you'll straighten me out on it. That you can put on ABC News Blotter or whatever it is, something that you were not ready, had not completely vetted, and wasn't ready for ABC News.
I think it'd make myself clear if I didn't.
Okay.
The stories are completely vetted by the same people who would go through our stories, same lawyers, in-house people for World News or 2020. But some stories are not deemed important enough for the World News Tonight. In other words, the same standard of accuracy is applied to everything that is on our website. But that story, the initial story, was not, and it wasn't the sexually explicit emails, which were obviously a very big story with his resignation. It was the earlier story that was still of interest. I felt was a new story in my judgment. But we had authenticated the emails from the congressman. I mean, we had that wrapped up in terms of the authenticity of the emails and of the story. That's the difference, I think.
Thank you. Let me just ask a couple more questions as we head toward the finish line for this segment of our day. Assuming that the web becomes more and more what everyone is saying it is, a place to put content, you have more space on your cable channel, the web has infinite space, it's a way to engage readers and so on. Here's the issue I'm wrestling with, especially for all of you people in broadcast, not cable, and not public television. According to all the laws governing broadcast television, there is a public interest obligation that news broadcasters have to fulfill, that broadcasters have to fulfill in exchange for their licenses, which are given to them by the public. And TV news, all the numbers say, local news in particular, has the biggest public square that there is. You are the place where the common culture for most people happens. What is the risk, if any, of offloading political content onto the web? Is there a risk that what gets broadcast, which is still way higher in the numbers, doesn't any longer play the role of glue and educating our citizens because you can always put that stuff online?
You mean deferring it to the?
Yeah.
Is that what you're trying? You're saying pushing it off to the web?
Yeah, you
so
can
as
always
not
do
to
that
it
stuff
on
there,
TV?
and so you can do more Anna Nicole on the air.
Well, my answer, not the industry answer, is that we're not prepared to do that. If you want to see how the two complement each other, and I'm sure others at the table can give you the same thing, because it is the year before the election, it's New Hampshire is right out there. Look at WMUR.com and find, for our Manchester station, and find the political pages, and you'll see what you can do to complement your television station on the web. So that would be my answer. We're not there yet.
Michelle?
It's not an either-or proposition.
Okay.
It can't be, because the tenet of television is public service. So if you park it in just one place, then you're not performing your public service. If you hold in your hands the opportunity for web and digital multicasting on digital channels and your analog channel until the Monday after Daytona 500 in February of 2009, when we all flip over, you have the responsibility to have it on all those platforms. You have to have it on your website, you have to have it on your multicast channels, you have to have it on your analog channels. It cannot be either or. I mean, you would not make weather either or, and that's a public service, so too is politics. You would not make education an either or, so too is politics. If people become web obsessed, and by that I mean so focused on how am I going to catch this new audience in this new media, they're going to lose a lot of people they already have that like them.
But also the evening newscast in many ways is just the front page. We have
Right.
time for 5 or 6 stories. And to your point, Charles, the early Foley story was a page 8 story.
Uh-huh.
It wasn't a page 1 story. It became a page 1 story, then it was on World News. But so this way we have more space.
And
That's what it
people
is.
will find it.
Yeah.
And people will find it. If they like it, they'll find it. We know they'll find it. That's why we all have websites now. So you can't just...
The greater threat to the integration, though, of web and news operations, I'm speaking locally, is budget. It's everything we can do to feed the broadcast beast. Yet, I'm in charge of our web content. But too often it becomes an afterthought because I'm not as trained, and I also just don't have the time because the beast that is the deadline of on air, I'm going to err on that side every time. And so it's going to be budget if we're going to bring the other along.
I really
lot
think
of us.
I really think that the real success stories are in those who are figuring out how to be both and. You know, we are no longer, any of us, in the television business. It's not what we do. We're in the information providing business, and the web is a marvelous, outstanding way to reach new audiences. Michelle said it right there. It's reaching new audiences. What a great way to do it. You know, I don't find anything scary about the internet or the web. I mean, there have been alternative weeklies and shock jock radio and for ever since the printing press was developed. We've always been dealing with alternative rumor mills that are out there. It just is what we do. There will always be a place for good, strong, vetted, unbiased journalism in this country. There will always be a place for that. And those of us who are doing it well and using all of the different modes to get that information through are the ones who will be successful.
Quick one, Fred?
Yeah, with all due respect to Andy's budget concerns, but we live in two different worlds here. Every one of us, ABC, NBC, we go to meetings where web, digital / new media revenue is being projected on charts to go like this as the traditional revenue will eventually go out. And you know, there are people who will be around much longer than I will who predict that the two will pass. But you know, every time you give that story at an NBC station to Drudge, and then it generates 500,000 clicks. Every time somebody clicks on it, it's a little bit of a ka-ching for us in our world. So there is money to be made on the web, and that will create the jobs that will provide the manpower and the cameras to do the kind of reporting you want.
Fred has revealed, really for you, you're kind of what you wanted on the record, but that is the real secret inside the suits. The headquarters, everyone sees the trend lines going.
And in fact,
right?
in 24 hours, within 24 hours after the massacre at Virginia Tech, the New York Times and other news organizations had purchased ads next to the Google search terms for Virginia massacre to be sure that when people went online, right next to the results online would be a click-through to theirs.
Yes, but I mean, that's the business.
That's the business.
That's the business we're in. Also, is we want you to come to our sites. We're doing politics because we believe the viewers want it. They're coming to our sites and talking about the web as a threat. News directors I know will take every friggin' platform they can. So give me a 24-hour news channel if I could. Give me my website, but I look at the .4 channels that we're using on digital. WNBC and KNBC on election night were on the air continuously while the network, for those who wanted network programming, could watch the network. So I mean, it's a great time for the local person in politics.
Let me give you the last tough question, Steve, which is that all over the country now, a topic in the coverage of the Virginia story is, should NBC News have released the material, shown the videos, shown the stills that the killer provided to them? There's all kinds of criticism going on. Is it a tough call?
Well, I know it was a very tough call of 30 Rock yesterday because there were a lot of conversations going on. But there was no question in my mind as journalists and trying to put at least, I hate to say, a face to what happened, to give a view, yes, you have to put it out there. Now, we did not put it all out there. There's a lot out there. And I will tell you today, and I know other news organizations doing the same thing, are dialing back how much of that content you're using. Much like after the shuttle disaster, after 9/11, how much do you need to show day 2, day 3? But day 1, I mean, who in this room was not riveted? Not because it was salacious, but you're saying, who is this person? What is in this person's mind? And not doing it, my gosh, we'd all be wondering. I have a much clearer idea how there is a real problem in parts of our society and an illness out there that we have to deal with.
The good news is that this conversation continues informally over iced tea and lemonade downstairs on the patio, followed by the awards presentation and lunch. But before we get to that, please join me in thanking this amazing panel. Thank you all.